Europe has already done what they hope to do with the Americas, the integration, you see. And during the free trade negotiations a long time ago, before they did the NAFTA deal, they actually talked about setting up a new parliament for the Americas. And they even buzzed around Montreal to be the new place to be. And they'd set all the big banks there and so on. But they are integrating year by year, more integration. And they actually said to the CFR they would use this terrorism thing to get closer ties, which means integration with the US. And they'll use that to their advantage, which they have been doing, of course, under the guise of security and all the rest of it. They are sharing their customs duties together. They're sharing their computers on all citizens with the US and Canada, and with the RCMP, CSIS, and CIA, FBI, and all the rest of them. So there are no real nations. We've just got this pretense as we go down the tubes under austerity and the banking plunders and so on, which again are all used to their advantage because they were engineered to do so. Now, in Europe, they're trying to keep this massive new Soviet together. And Mr. Van Rompuy, Herman, they call him Van Rompuy. You should just call him Herr Rompuy. We've heard of a Herr before who had big ideas too. And it says Euroscepticism leads to war. They're trying to keep this mammoth together, this big corrupt mammoth, this anti-democratic system that just plunders every country for the big fat cats on top who run it. It says, Euroscepticism leads to war, this is what he says, and a rising tide of nationalism is the European Union's biggest enemy. Herman Van Rompuy, the President of Europe, has told the Berlin audience. This is the same guy that said, in the last time he opened his mouth, he said that the nation state is dead. And he was awfully pleased with that. Euroscepticism leads to war and a rising tide of nationalism, the European Union's greatest problem and so on. It says, EU founder President Van Rompuy delivers his State of Europe speech at the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. Rompuy linked hostility to the EU and the idea that countries could leave the Union to a revival of aggressive nationalism. No, I think it would be self-preservation, the way they're getting plundered and taxed to keep this behemoth going. It says we have together to fight the danger of a new Euroscepticism. This is no longer the monopoly of a few countries. He said in every member state there are people who believe their country can survive alone in a globalized world. It is more an illusion. It is a lie. It says the controversial comments made on Tuesday come less than a fortnight after David Cameron, who's the Prime Minister of Britain at the moment, at least he's the puppet, declared that he was a Eurosceptic after his grueling Brussels summit battle to block a sharp increase in the EU budget. That's more tax money from Britain to the EU, usually, at a time of national austerity again, meaning poverty, belt tightening. Bill Cash, the Conservative chairman of the House of Commons European Scrutiny Committee, said he entirely repudiated a link between the Euroscepticism and the rise of nationalism. He says it's not anti-European to be pro-democracy. See, the EU is not a democratic institution. It wasn't designed to be. The problem is that the democratic base for the EU is waning or wanting. He says the solution to the rise of the far right is proper democracy exercised through national parliaments. Clarifying their remarks, a spokesman for Mr. Van Rompuy has stressed that he was not talking about Mr. Cameron's brand of Euroscepticism, but about those people who want to leave the EU. It's nothing to do with what Mr. Cameron thinks. It's a point that Britain or other countries are not able to survive on their own. I'm sure Mr. Cameron would agree with that, he said. Then it says Downing Street declined to comment. Dan Hanna, a Tory member of the European Parliament opposed to EU membership, dismissed the idea that countries cannot go it alone. Norway and Switzerland seem to be scraping by somehow with higher standards of living than anyone else in the EU. Neither seem to have been involved in a war in recent years, he said, and they're not getting taxed into the ground to keep this mammoth going. So they're determined to keep this massive thing. See, they planned it 100 years ago, this amalgamation. With the Milner Group, which became the Royal Institute of International Affairs. They planned it. They set up the machinery to integrate Europe into this big mammoth, again, non-democratic system. And the US is supposed to copy it with Canada, Mexico, Chile, and a few other countries in Latin America. Eventually all of Latin America and the Caribbean, I should mention that too. And it's not democratic. It's not set up to be democratic. But this is the farce we're given, as they try to basically label folk who want to leave it as nationalist and almost like Nazis, you see.